Thank you so much for being here. My name is C. Meyer. I'm the exhibitions manager here at Blue Sky Gallery in Portland, Oregon. And we are thrilled tonight to have Kevin Bennett Moore, who is one of our exhibiting artists this month. Kevin came to our exhibitions committee awareness, I think, through Critical Mass. And just completely blown away by this exhibition. It's been so fun to see Kevin's work on the walls. And if you're local in Portland or able to make it to Portland, if you're nearby, highly recommend trying to see this show before it closes. It is up through February 25th. So definitely come by and see the show. We also have Diego Moreno's work in the other gallery, which is fantastic as well. So pop in if you can't make it. You can check out some of the images, more of the images on our website. But again, thanks for being here. I'm just going to start off with our land acknowledgement statement to kick it off. So we at Blue Sky humbly acknowledge that our programming is being held on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and the many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. In this online format, you may be participating from other areas, and we invite you to consider your own land acknowledgement that reflects your location. We also acknowledge that the very technology we rely on for these online programs is inequitably distributed and not equally accessible, creating new virtual displacements and exclusions. We call attention to the need for action now and in the future to address these disparities. All right, so a little bit about Kevin before I pass it off. Kevin Bennett Moore is a recent graduate with departmental honors from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. His self-portrait-based projects largely discuss queerness by utilizing the past to talk about current politics. Moore is influenced greatly by films of the 1950s and 60s, gender performativity, and ideals of mid-century American culture. He is represented by Gallery Caiaphas in Boston, Massachusetts. And here are a couple of shots of the current exhibition here at Blue Sky. We wish you could be here in person, Kevin, but we're so happy to have you here tonight. And thank you again for popping in on East Coast time and staying up a little late with us. It's really wonderful to have you here. So I'm going to stop my share and you can take it from here, Kevin. Oh, and you are muted. Hold on. Let's see, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Cool. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay,
You're
cool.
Good.
Sweet. So I just want to start off by saying thank you for everyone coming out tonight for this little chat. Thank you for having my show. This has been so exciting, even though I wasn't able to make it for the opening or really at all. I'm going to go ahead and share this. This is the bit I want to share here. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So this is almost a throwback for me, this show, which has been so great to kind of revisit throughout the printing process. This was my senior thesis work at Mass Art. So 2019, this project started and went into 2020. And soon fizzled off when the pandemic started, as you can imagine. So it's been just such an honor to be able to show the work in this scale. I never really thought I was going to be printing it for a gallery. So thank you. Yeah, so I'll just kind of go through the images as slowly as possible. And I kind of just wanted to talk about my thoughts on the overall project along with each individual image and kind of where I was thinking as I was going with this project. So starting off with this one here, I was really inspired by films of the 1950s, which was previously acknowledged. But when I think about the kind of scope of masculinity within the films, I'm always thinking about how men were always of this sort of, they kind of always had this femininity to them when watching a Hitchcock film or something of this sort, where I was thinking about this project and my own kind of experience as a queer person in this world, thinking how can I kind of put myself into that like feminine scope of film. So the project kind of launched with the idea that I was going to be playing one character and I was going to be seen kind of throughout this timeline that almost I was trying to play with my school year. So like beginning summer, mid-winter into the spring. So this character was inspired by my kind of like a mix here. The name George came from my grandfather, who was married to my grandmother, and she's like my biggest inspiration. She was kind of a 60s, 70s queen. So I have always really looked at her imagery and everything as like an inspiration to set forth my like fascination with mid-century aesthetic. So all of these things kind of are playing in my mind as I was thinking, like, how can I make a story about something or someone, but also utilize my own queer experience within that space? So I was watching John Waters, and there's a scene in Crybaby where the girl is swimming with a bathing cap and a cigarette, and I just was like, I have to kind of recreate that image. I have to like try to blend now and then into this picture that's somewhat uncanny, who smokes a cigarette while they're swimming. So that was my start of the project. As I moved forward, I started to think of relationships in the home and like how we can think of, you know, queerness in a way that isn't necessarily like blunt and in your face. And a lot of imagery that I associate with queer work is more along the lines of provocative or directly about maybe the queer body or the queer experience in a more sexual way. So I was trying to kind of like divert from this idea and think about just like experiences that I've had and how I can associate like things with my relationship to my mother, but also my relationship with my own queerness. So along came like the idea, you know, when I was little, you know, painting your nails was taboo. And as I've grown into myself, painting my nails become a regular thing. So I wanted to blend that idea with the mother being the one who I'm now painting the nails of, kind of trying to show something that isn't normally seen. I feel like that's was kind of the theme around this project, was to kind of like unveil something that might not be directly queer, if that makes any sense. So with that, I tried to make images of conflict, maybe if that's like internal or external. So the like male figure off to the left is kind of supposed to be the father. Woman off to the right is supposed to be the mother. I'm kind of side-eyeing. I was playing a lot with ideas of my childhood here, where I didn't particularly eat what was served for dinner. So that's why like here I'm having cereal instead of the pasta being served. So a lot of the ideas of childhood going to play into this as well. A lot of the scenes were staged at home, and my actual parents helped me along the process. So it was good, like kind of collaboration. Yeah, just kind of another thought of femininity, things that maybe a younger queer person would do versus a non-queer person, is maybe play in the bathroom, you know, just make a mess. Kind of where my thoughts are on things like this. And then there were scenes like that I decided to think a little bit more in the world of fantasy, where I could think there was something happening, and then how can I interpret that? How can I make an image that might feel like you want to know what happened before and what's happening after, like that mid frame of the picture? So I loved the drive-in, and I decided that I wanted to kind of capture a scene where we can draw conclusions via like our own thought process on this. Whereas my story might be different than the viewer's story. I was really thinking like about, how can I make things feel like you can enter without any like explanation from myself, like if that is making any sense. So with like an image like this, like the goal is to kind of grab an emotional response from the viewer and let them draw their own conclusions. So my storyline was the movie was overwhelming. I've gotten out of the car and I've turned back towards the audience and I'm like sipping my soda for some relief. So in my thoughts, like there is humor along with my own experience because I am constantly laughing. Like I feel like at my own ridiculousness. So I was really trying to pull humor into a lot of these images to kind of reveal that like, although sometimes there are serious topics, they can also be met with humor, whether that's maybe like a coping mechanism for my own queer experience, I'm unsure. But I feel like I was trying to draw a lot of these themes within the project. Like there are like, everything is kind of dramatic and it's kind of ridiculous, but it's also very serious and it's also humorous, and just all these different emotions are happening at once. This one, so when I look at this, I feel like this is direct. At this point, I feel like it's so direct to me. Like this kid is trying to meet the standards, but just can't get through it. Like we're gonna watch a show instead. Kind of what I was like thinking with this image, just this distraction. Like how can I distract myself from this like horrible idea of masculinity? And then I featured my grandmother in this picture. She's in the little frame down there, my Nana. So a little ode to her here. Yeah, this is one of the second images I made from this project. And this one really, I thought, was about trying to carry the idea of the before and after. We can draw our own conclusions by what's happening here. And like the storyline I kind of created was, I was knocked down. I don't know if it's by a person or my own self. I never really came to that conclusion, but I was knocked down. I smacked my face against the ground. And then I realized that my glasses had broken, the lens had fallen out. So that's kind of why I chose this angle. I wanted you to be kind of on the ground with me. And then you can draw your own conclusion to what was going on before and after the image. Same kind of concept. I feel like I don't know if, I feel like each one kind of like holds a different narrative, but they sort of somehow kind of capture the same idea as I was like moving through this story. There's like ups and downs, and here are like two downs where like I've fallen, and then the next slide I have gotten my face completely smashed into the cake. But I really wanted this story to feel like kind of an autobiographical tale of my own life, but not really my own life, like kind of like go like teeter the line of me and not me. So this kind of birthday scene was happening as any other birthday scene happened, but I needed it to be something a little bit more than a birthday scene. So the original like image that I wanted to take that was going to be a sequence was actually the Polaroid down at the bottom of like me having a happy birthday, but then the tragedy had to strike. So that's really what I needed to be on display mostly. It's just getting beaten down, as you will. Yeah, this picture, I really just wanted to make a picture about a sad tree. I let this tree die for like 2 months. It was in the living room forever. And I was like, I really just want this tree to feel really sad. Um, I've always wanted to take a picture of a tinsel tree as well. So I just took this because I wanted it to be sad. And then this definitely feels like a childhood picture, being on the phone, like your landline. I wanted to be like potentially maybe gossiping or talking to my neighbor. But I was kind of using the erector set as my face instead. Like I'm hiding behind this ridiculous idea of what a boy looks like. So I just thought that was an clever little thing. I also love the pamphlet itself. This is the only image in the last picture from the series that is named. They're all untitled. And then I decided towards the end, I wanted to add some names to the things here. So I decided to name this one model number 1. It had the anticipation was like, I'm going to, or the expectation for myself was I'm going to make versions of this same idea. So this started out as my number 1 because I'm modeling after what was known or seen to be the ideal man. I mean, historically, magazines tell us what to do. If that's fashion, so be, or, whatever other magazine you may read. So the idea was I am going to try and just be what the magazine tells me to be, what society is telling me to be, although I'm really not quite hitting the mark. I'm checking the mirror to make sure I'm right, but in my eyes, I never hit the mark. Yeah, I would also love to do a quick chat about my process as well, just so you guys get a little bit of an idea of what's going on with the staging of these pictures. Just so maybe I can answer any questions you guys might have right now. Just kind of going through them quickly, like most of the imagery starts off as a drawing, an idea that comes to my head, and then it's sketched. And then the props will be collected, or the lighting will be figured out, or whoever needs to be in the image will be notified. And then things like this image, the wallpaper would be, this one I printed this wallpaper, used the aunt's bathroom, coordinated a drive-in, rearranged the living room, everything that happens there. And then some images do come to life and some never do. So there are definitely some pictures from this series that never really were able to come to fruition because I just didn't have the means or the availability or something like that. So yeah, all of the images kind of have a process in themselves creating them. You guys have any questions about that? But yeah, that's all I have.
Thanks, Kevin. Something I really love about just the way you're thinking back into this time is like, I mean, for me, I remember looking at old photographs of my grandparents, and you really capture that feeling of like that time period. And I think it's like in the way, like the way that you're lighting, but also like how all the props and the clothing. And you just really I feel like you've like really hit it really well. And a question actually from Yu Young on the chat is wondering, where did you source all the props and materials for your sets?
Some of the materials are at home. A big inspiration I mentioned in the beginning was my Nana. What happened was I ended up growing up in the house that my mom grew up in. So as I grew up, I started to kind of rifle through some, we have like an old chest, and it had her sweaters and her yearbook and her senior pictures. And so I sort of have objects from her lifetime and my grandfather's objects that I use. So this mirror, for example, is like around the house, but a huge source is Etsy. You can find anything on Etsy. But also, if I go to the antique store, sometimes I'll find something like the isomat I found at a thrift store and was like, I need that to be like George's birthday present. So I made it inspiration could strike anywhere. So I just say like, go and look, and you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the little touches that you have, like you, even in this one that we're looking at with just the fact that there's the Polaroid you have, but yeah, like I think there's all these little fun, I don't know, I call them kind of Easter eggs, even just looking at the embroidery on these two sweaters. And
I'm wearing the sweater. I didn't even
yeah,
mean
I
to.
know.
That's so funny.
That when you were talking, I was like, it's a sweater.
Funny.
Okay. Oh yeah, and in the picture at the drive-in, Yu Young's also a follow-up question. I was curious about the McDonald's cup and where you were able to find that.
I believe I got that one on eBay. Oh, you know what? No, I got that one at the antique store because I knew they had it, but I wanted the bigger sized cup that I bought on eBay, and it was going to come a day later. I remember my shipment was delayed, but I had crit, so everything needed to be done for crit. So I was like, I'll just compensate and grab this smaller McDonald's cup. But that's a good example of things I utilized from going to the antique store and looking was, oh, how can I incorporate, like, McDonald's is so iconic, and how can I like pin the time period with an object that can also be like utilized in a scene. So I remember being like, oh, did they have a bigger one? So I actually have the bigger one, but I had to just like kind of work with what I could.
Yeah, I love that. And I was curious with like, especially with this, you mentioned too, being influenced by like different films. And I was curious what type of research beyond like doing all the collecting of the objects, but like what kind of research you did for visual inspiration. Did you watch a lot of old movies, Hitchcock movies, or from the 50s and 60s to kind of give you like, because it has a very like your images have a very cinematic quality to them.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't really mention, is I started photographing because I felt like I wanted to make movies. I really was like, oh, I really want to do film myself. And then I started photographing because it felt a little bit easier to do a self-portrait and create a still. So in that process of taking pictures, I would watch film because that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then the more I kind of started to research other photographers that are also using cinema as their inspiration, I kind of got drawn into the idea that you can like freeze the frame from the film that you're creating. So yes, totally just watching all the Hitchcock I could, and some, I love going to like an old movie. They have a theater in Cambridge that plays like all these 30s movies, and the imagery that you can find from some of those old movies is so whack. So it's like, how can I kind of take that wackiness and like throw it into like my own like work in some way? This is a direct, Hitchcock reference. I have the birds in the background. And so I kind of wanted to see like how I could bring some of the like emotion and lighting and kind of all those ideas from this kind of film aesthetic into my own work. I think I was kind of trying to just tell people with this image like what I was thinking.
That's great. Thank you for elaborating on that question for me. And also for the folks in the audience, if you do have questions for Kevin, go ahead and put them in the chat and I will read them out loud from there if folks are curious about anything that Kevin's mentioned or images. So with that in mind, we have a question from Kristen, our executive director here, wondering if you are or will continue this particular series, and are you working on other ideas?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I don't know. Sometimes I look at this work and feel like I was just wild. My most recent project that I did in the during the pandemic was a lot less, um, I think, upfront with the idea of throwing emotion. This was more of an earlier work for me, so I was kind of trying to like throw it all out there. And as I like started to make more work, I kind of tried to make it even more ambiguous. I wanted it to be even harder to kind of grab what I was trying to say. And I don't know if that was because I was trying something new, or I was a response from the pandemic, being at home. I don't know if the work matured in any way, but when I compare the two, sometimes I feel like, can I continue to make it the way I'm making it, but also bring some of the elements from this work into my other work? Can I like be as bold? So I don't know if I'd ever want to tag on to this series, but with the work that I'm actually kind of starting to make now, I really do look to this work to kind of try to bring in some of that, like some of that I feel like I was missing from that in between work. So I don't know if that answers the question.
That's great. Thanks, Kevin. Our gallery manager, M, is asking one question that M often gets from people who come to the gallery and have been here to see your current iteration on our walls, is whether or not the series is meant to be read in a specific order. Is there a particular narrative you hope visitors will pick up on, or are the images more self-contained?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I initially wanted it to be sequential, and I wanted it to move with the seasons, like starting in summer and kind of moving into the winter. So the sequence on the wall, I thought maybe if you walk into the gallery and see the swimming picture from across, you might be drawn into that picture and then start from there. But I know maybe if I walk into a gallery, I might see that picture and say, okay, I'll get to it. The artist probably wants me to start here. So I do leave the story open to interpretation. Most of the work, I really just want people to go in with their own idea of like what they think the world is about, and then pull what they can and gather what they can and kind of create their own story as much as like possible, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like you were really considerate and thoughtful when you were thinking about how to design the install.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of people have made like really great positive comments about just the experience of looking at the images in the gallery. And I love how like the picture with the erector set is very low, and it feels
Mhm.
like you could just kind of sit next to it and just be like on the rug with you.
Cool.
But I love that that's kind of how you considered to the viewer's experience of actually being in the space with the work as well. And it's also wonderful that like they're larger scale. Um, so just complimenting you on your
Thank you.
people have asked like, oh, did Kevin do that himself? Or I was like, yep, that's so just for folks, like Kevin actually built a small model with foam core and and sent me pictures of like a mini blue sky gallery, which is wonderful and amazing. Okay, moving on, next questions. Krista says, I love your work, interested in hearing who your favorite photographers are, seeing an obvious connection to Cindy Sherman, but with a modern, cool, queer vibe.
Cool. Thank you. Yes, Cindy Sherman is the reason why I did not title anything. Very silly now, as I've been trying to communicate any show or work with anybody. It's, what image is this? And everything has a nickname now. And that's again why I decided to name things. But yes, I love Cindy Sherman's work. She was a huge inspiration at this time. But but I have, gained a bunch of knowledge since this time, and I definitely look at photographers like Alex Prager. Trying to think of some like kind of more obscure ones that like I took from school. Even work like, I guess, Gregory Crutzen. This time I definitely was looking at his work. Any photographer that really is utilizing a staged scene, I was kind of trying to, look at what they were doing and see how I could kind of do that too and communicate the same idea. Like, as much as it looks staged and I wanted it to, like, you knew what was happening behind the scenes, I also wanted you to be able to fall fully into the image itself as well. And I felt like a lot of those photographers that were staging work made that happen for me. Like, the beauty of photography for me was you can build the set and then make the picture. And just like film, we all know it's not really there, but we feel like it is there. So that's really what I was looking at with a lot of work. And then like more natural work too from the time period, just so I could see really what was happening in that time period as well.
Thanks, Kevin. Ralph Wells is asking, would you elaborate on your surprise at having your work on the wall? How did you react to your own work in a form you never considered?
Thank you. It was definitely really exciting. I think that was my first reaction. I had to ship them to Portland from Boston, so the cost was in consideration, which led me to use the adhesive vinyl to kind of make stickers for the walls, which then allowed me to print at a larger scale than I usually would. So being able to bring them, even I think some of them are like larger than life, was really exciting, because when I initially thought about the work, I was definitely thinking like of a cinema like screen, like a projection or something. So being able to really blow them up and make them feel like these scenes from a screen was very exciting. My surprise definitely is just the fact that I was very driven at this time, senior year. I was like, I'm just gonna like go off and like make work and just hope that like maybe I could like show it. So it was just really exciting to be asked to show the work in that scale and on a wall.
Yeah, it definitely worked out really well in favor. Thanks for answering that for Rolf. Chris Rauschenberg asks, Vertigo is the Hitchcock movie with the most complicated questioning about identity. Is that film one of the more resonant ones for you? What films have rung your bell the loudest?
Well, that's such a tricky question. Yeah, I think Vertigo is definitely one of the more captivating films by Hitchcock. That one definitely, inspires me in ways. But I think when I think of his films and the interest I have with what I'm trying to say, normally leads me to think of North by Northwest or Rear Window, like that, like kind of when I think about a film like Rear Window and why I'm more inspired by that would be his showing, what made that film so shocking was it was one of the first time people were like faced with their own kind of, idea of creeping. Like people were shocked to see somebody almost calling them out on screen, like they're creeping at their neighbors. So I think like the idea of kind of like calling things out in certain ways through imagery was why I was more like interested in a movie like Rear Window. And like the birds just the ridiculousness of it. Like, I think that's why I am interested in that kind of film, because like, as much as he's always gathering all this stuff up, he's also kind of doing it in a ridiculous sort of manner. So yeah, I think that is a tricky question, because Virgo is also, like, you know, one of those films that, they say Vertigo is definitely one of those films that, like, I think challenges me in other ways, and I feel like I have trouble interpreting like everything that I want to. So I think I'm just drawn to like the other ideas where I feel like I can kind of like put them in your face, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Thanks, Kevin. Kind of thinking back to your inspiration with Cindy Sherman, I was curious, since you're playing a character as George, the importance of using yourself as George as like kind of a stand-in instead of using like a model. And I'm wondering if that was intentional or more out of a necessity. If you can talk a little more on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. I feel like initially a lot of my self-portraits were necessity. Before I went to school, I fooled around the camera and just naturally started taking self-portraits, and that felt like just accessibility. Like, I'm at home and I can use myself and that's fine. But then as I started to take more pictures and more self-portraits, I felt like I'm trying to portray something and I feel like I know what I want it to look like. So I'm gonna just do it rather than direct it. And then my project that came before this, I tried playing multiple characters in this like crazy story that kind of ended up turning into a disaster. So when I moved on to this project, I said, I'm gonna do one character. There's gonna be one person and I'll just play this one character. So I kind of turned into me enjoying the process of self-portraiture. It made maybe the images feel a little bit more like mine in that way. I could kind of control the scene how I wanted to. Yeah, I think that's why I do that.
That makes a lot of sense. And you made a lot of these in 2020, right? So
Some of them, yeah.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of just, if we were unable to be around other people too much. Right.
Which is funny you mentioned that, because my work that I did like through 2020 into 2021 was, my critiques during school were, you should try to take photos of other people. So I carried that with me. I'm like, okay, I really should try other people, see how I do. And the work during the pandemic that was like, as we started to loosen up, was of other people. Just kind of funny, because it would have made more sense if I was working during the pandemic and the height of it. And it's like, oh, I can only use myself.
Totally. Yeah, that's interesting. Just another comment from Ralph. Your imagined world is full of specific cultural references, but put together to be a place rather than a specific time. It's kind of a nice thought. And then Candace Biggerstaff comments, your work is amazing. I love how your images are staged. Do you also do images that aren't staged?
No. No, I don't. I've tried, and it's so hard for me, at least. Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think like photo is so cool. There's so many aspects of photography, and I definitely, although I love to go see somebody else's work that's staged, I love to see other people make photos that aren't staged, because then for me it's also like a new experience, and how other people utilize photography is really fascinating. But no, I try. The only thing that's unstaged is like if I use a plane in a photo, I have to like try to catch the plane in the sky, and I'm like running down the street to like catch a plane. Yeah.
You need someone who's just documenting your process and have those pictures of you.
Yeah.
A comment from Sandy Polishuk, the comedy, The Trouble with Harry is to me the Hitchcock sleeper, which seems no one other than me ever saw, but it had me almost falling out of my seat. It would be great to see your reaction to it.
Okay. I don't think I've seen that, so I'll have to watch.
Thanks for the recommendation, Sandy. Max Gordon says, as mentioned previously, the cinematic quality to your photographs is unmatched. Gorgeous work. Are there any particular ideas for series you're sparked to create into fruition in the future?
Good question. Thank you, Max. Yeah, I think so. My work that I have kind of like sketched out for the future really, I think, directly references some films that are maybe cult classics or iconic, and I'm sort of trying to reinterpret some of those moments. But I definitely want to, like, when I think about making more work, I definitely want to stay within the world created, but pull as much reference as I can to draw conclusions. I'm definitely thinking about human destruction. I mean, this is the perfect week. Like all these environmental disasters that happened this week is like the forefront of kind of like what I'm thinking of, and but in a way that like the world is created by us, like we control everything. And like just as an example, I'm think like the Truman Show is a huge inspiration for, I feel like, the work I'm starting to think about, because everything is so refined and controlled, and it's created to be, you know, this masterpiece, but in the end it's an absolute mess. And I feel like when I think about this country and the like political landscape of our country, and I think that especially with the idea of like mid-century culture and, you know, the 50s housewife, like everything's kind of like constructed in that way, and everyone wants to say it's perfect and it's great, and like even like I guess in Ohio they're saying everything's fine. Like we love to tuck it under the rug, right? But what I want to also bring forward is like it's also a disaster. So I always am thinking about how can I, like, I think that's why I like to throw in ideas of just like things that are awful. Like I've smashed my face into the cake and I've fallen to the ground because like these things aren't really as magnificent as they are. Even though in my brain, I'm like, oh my God, the 50s, that's so cool and glamorous. But I really am trying to like kind of smash through the idea of, you know, the greatest time in the country where, you know, everything was turquoise and pink, right? So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's definitely what I think. And moving forward, I'm really kind of thinking about how humans have decided to ruin our own lives.
It makes me think of something you said earlier where I wrote it down because I thought it was great. You said that, you know, you're trying to unveil something that might not be directly clear. And it sounds like you're still kind of in that's sort of what you're trying to do, even if like what you're thinking about now and kind of your new work. So I'm excited to see what you'll be up to next.
Cool, thanks.
With that in mind. Courtney Meskel is asking if you would you ever consider doing film?
Yes, not to be let down. There was supposed to be a film element to this project. I have 16mm footage that I never got developed because the pandemic happened. So as I was kind of taking these pictures, I was also kind of trying to record some scenes, some that would exist kind of before and after. Like Alex Prager has a few pieces that have the stills kind of within the moving. So I was trying to do something similar here, where it was almost like a home video. It was black and white with like George being like documented. So if I think about film, I think about a film that's like that more so than something that we know is like a Hitchcock, like a full-length feature. It's going to be a snippet here and there of the process, but not directly behind the scenes. Still kind of playing that role, but before and after the image. Thank you, Courtney.
Were you able to get that film developed, the 16mm, or is it still?
I think it's like right here next to me in the camera.
One day.
Yeah, I know. It makes me sad. I think the reason I really just haven't taken it out is because I still have some footage on there. So I like, well, why do I waste it? And yeah, I know. That pandemic really messed us up.
Yeah. And there's a comment from Scott often, where's the butcher? I'm not.
Thanks, Scott. Scott is in one of my images from November 2020. So my like work after this, he was a classmate. So he begged to be in a picture. So we made a photo of him as like a butcher. Yeah. So.
Well, thanks everybody for your questions. If there's any other last questions, feel free to put them in the chat. One thing I was wondering about for you, Kevin, as a young artist coming out of school and getting gallery representation early, has that affected the way you approach making at all? Or for folks that are curious about like what it's like for artists to have gallery representation? I think that's a pretty amazing thing too, to come out of undergrad and then
yeah.
So just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question, because when I was in school, I made this work and was just like, let me just do what I can. And hopefully my goal was to make work that I felt confident submitting to things. And I felt like, okay, can this bring me into the world? So that's what was my main focus was. And when the pandemic hit and we locked down, the project kind of fizzled quickly. And I kind of refocused my like whole kind of life onto, like, I felt like I didn't graduate. I felt like, okay, life is starting right now, March 2020, here we go. I have to become an artist now. So I think that this is a kind of, that's a tricky question, because I definitely was like, my goal kind of out of school, I thought, like, I really want gallery representation. I want to be able to continue to almost like have crit, like, or a review. Like I in school was making work to hopefully like put on a wall, right? So yeah, that's a hard question to answer, because I did critical mass, which is how I got here. And I know Arlette did critical mass, who's my the owner of the gallery. And I knew a guy who worked there, and so he curated a show that was for non-gallery reps in like the back little room. So then I was kind of like able to meet Arlette and connect the dots between critical mass. And so like I was fortunate to be asked to be a member of the gallery, and then I was able to like whip together a solo show like, right out of school, and it kind of was all very fast and exciting. But I do think it's been positive and negative. You know, I was able to continue to like make work because I knew like, okay, I'm gonna have this show coming up and I have to get, you know, all the images I want done, and it kind of sets a nice goal for me to continue to make work because it's hard in the real world to make work. But then the security of the gallery has also been a little bit hard to feel like, oh, I need to make something. I don't really need to make something because now I have the gallery and I'm like, well, maybe I'll do something and maybe I'll try to have a show at some point. So the drive has dwindled since, like, I mean, coming out of school, pandemic, show, I just felt like burnt out. Yeah, so trying to get excited about work again is kind of tricky, but I'm very like grateful for the gallery and, you know, everything that they've allowed me to do. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, that was really great. I really appreciate you opening up about your experience, just because there's a lot of young artists who probably are curious how to do it. And I know
Yeah.
that especially when you're out of school and you don't have that access anymore, it can, like, as you were saying, it can be really challenging to keep that, either the way of making or your access to studio, or even just having your peers and you, as you were saying, the crit. So I think also just, you know, you getting your work out there and you see how that has like put you through to where you're at, which is great. So doing those opportunities like critical mass, it's just like all those little steps you do to, and we'll see what happens now that your work's here and getting seen. So
yeah, I have a piece of advice for anyone that's really just like, so because I felt like in school it was like taboo to talk about what's next and how do I get a gallery, and a lot of galleries you'll like look at and say like, oh, I would love to somehow get my work in front of this gallery, but they don't accept submissions. Or because when I came out I was like, how do I do that? Like, no idea. So like I submitted wisely, you know, don't always just submit and pay, you know, submit to things that you might like, you know, opportunity could come from. And then I just don't be shy. If you like really like a gallery, go in, revisit the shows, chit chat. There's so many people that come in to Arlette's gallery and just like chit chat with her, and over time, like she'll be like, oh, well, I'm interested, like show me something. I'm friendly with artist Parker Day. I don't know if you know her work. She's based in LA. She was showing at a gallery, so I asked her, like, how did you do that? And she kind of said the same thing, you know, just be sociable, don't be shy, just try, you know, keep making work, submit, be friendly, I guess. Yeah, so it's not impossible, it's just scary.
That's great advice, Kevin. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for sharing your process and your project tonight with everybody. It's been really wonderful having you showing your work this month. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And yeah, I'm super excited to see where your process and ideas go next, and definitely be keeping an eye on you.
Thank you so much. This is
come out to Portland when you can. We'd love to meet. We'd love to
I know I need to go to Portland. I need to. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here tonight.